In 1966, the US Army constructs a massive fortress in the Cu Chi district, 30 kilometers northwest of Saigon. It is a masterpiece of military engineering. Thousands of soldiers, heavy artillery, tanks, a fortified perimeter with watchtowers and floodlights that turn midnight into day. On paper, this base is impenetrable. But every single night, the men inside are dying. It follows a chilling pattern. Darkness falls. Suddenly, an explosion rips through the barracks. Gunfire erupts. By the time the response teams arrive, there's only silence. No retreating figures, no trails, no bodies. Just dead Americans and a base that feels like it is haunted. Every morning, the commander receives the same report. Attacked last night. Enemy disappeared. No contact established. For months, the commanders sweep the jungle. They find nothing. No supply lines, no camps. They are fighting ghosts. Then a patrol spots a hole. It is tiny, hidden under a layer of leaves just outside the perimeter wire. An engineer drops to his knees. He shines a light into the opening. The tunnel goes down, turns, and vanishes into total darkness. He stands up. "Sir, I think we found the problem." He has no idea of the scale. Beneath his boots, beneath a mess hall, beneath the barracks, stretch 250 kilometers of tunnels. Over the next 9 years, this hidden world will kill more Americans than any single battle of the war. How does an army with no machinery build an underground city beneath the most powerful military on Earth? The Cu Chi tunnels were not a sudden military project. They began as a way to survive French bombs in the 1940s. For 20 years, they grew. The secret was the soil itself, red laterite clay. It is soft when dug, but dries hard as concrete. It does not collapse under pressure. It does not flood easily. It absorbs the shock of a B-52 strike. The Vietnamese did not choose this location by accident. They turned the ground into a building material. Their tools were primitive, short-handled hoes, wicker baskets, human hands. They dug only at night to evade French patrols. They carried the dirt away in baskets and scattered it across distant fields so aerial reconnaissance would see no fresh piles. Every entrance was a ghost. Trapdoors hidden under termite mounds, entrances submerged deep in ponds where you had to dive underwater to find them. The openings were 60 centimeters wide, just large enough for a small Vietnamese peasant to squeeze through, just small enough to ensure an American soldier would get stuck in the dark. By the early 1960s, the network was already there, but when the Viet Cong faced the US Army, they realized the surface was suicide. They had to go deeper. They expanded aggressively, connecting villages and supply routes into a subterranean labyrinth. They built 3 distinct levels. The first was 3 meters down, shallow enough for a quick ambush, but deep enough to shrug off the weight of heavy artillery. Level 2, 6 meters deep. A sanctuary when the sky started falling. Level 3, 9 meters beneath the surface. This floor was built for one purpose: to survive a direct hit from the heaviest ordnance in the American arsenal. Vertical shafts linked these layers. Specialized trapdoors stood between every tier. If the US Army flooded the top level, the Viet Cong dropped to the second. If gas choked the second, they retreated to the third. This system had a counter for every move. These weren't just escape routes. They were a city, a shadow civilization thriving in the dark. Surgeons operated on wounded men by candlelight in makeshift hospitals. Kitchens vented smoke through hundreds of meters of horizontal pipes. By the time that smoke broke the surface, it was far from any entrance. It was invisible to the eyes above. Factories recycled captured American brass into new ammunition. Printing presses churned out propaganda. Wells provided fresh water. Thousands of people lived in these quarters for months without ever seeing the sun. At the height of the war, 10,000 people lived inside the Cu Chi tunnels simultaneously. They were born in the dirt. They married in the dark. They died in the shadows. An entire society functioned 9 meters beneath the boots of American patrols. And the soldiers walking above had no idea they were standing on a city. The US Army tried everything to bury them: gas, fire, water, dogs. Every failure only taught the Viet Cong how to survive the next round. The first solution was the most obvious: gravity. If you cannot see the enemy, crush the earth they hide in. In 1967, Operation Rolling Thunder began. B-52 bombers turned the Cu Chi district into a moonscape. Thousands of tons of high explosives rained down. When the smoke cleared, the jungle was gone. Only ash and craters remained. From the air, it looked like total victory. It wasn't. 9 meters down, the bottom level was untouched. The Viet Cong had retreated to the deep and waited. When the engines faded, they came back up. They even used the bomb craters to collect rainwater. The very weapons meant to destroy them had accidentally improved their fortress. The second solution was chemical: Agent Orange, a defoliant designed to strip the enemy of their shadow. If the trees are gone, the Viet Cong have nowhere to hide. Aircraft sprayed millions of gallons across the region. Within days, the forest turned brown and skeletal. The landscape died. But the tunnels didn't care. You can kill every tree on the surface, but the earth remains. The Viet Cong stayed underground during the spraying. When they emerged, the dead landscape actually made their night movements easier. No undergrowth to slow them down, no leaves to rustle. Third came the water. Engineers pumped thousands of gallons directly into the mouth of the tunnels. The plan was to drown them or force them out. It was simple, it was logical, and it failed. The Viet Cong had installed watertight trapdoors between every major corridor. When the water rushed in, they simply sealed the section. One segment was sacrificed. The rest of the network stayed dry. Engineers from the US Army pumped thousands of gallons of water into Cu Chi. They flooded maybe 2% of the total network. The other 98% continued operating normally. Then came the gas. The plan was to pump poison into the darkness. It was meant to spread through every corridor. Nobody was supposed to survive. But the tunnels were too long, too complex. The gas dispersed and weakened as it traveled. By the time it reached the deeper sections, it was barely an irritant. The Viet Cong had installed ventilation baffles throughout the system. These were simple wooden panels. They could be closed to seal off airflow between sections. Gas entered one area, got sealed off, and vanished. The engineers had no way of knowing if it worked. Nothing ever came out the other end. Next, they tried the dogs. Specially trained German shepherds. These animals could track the enemy by scent, but the Viet Cong learned fast. They rubbed American soap and pepper around the entrances. The soap masked the human scent with a smell the dogs associated with friendly forces. The pepper destroyed their ability to track anything for hours. Handlers watched their dogs walk directly over hidden entrances without reacting. The program was quietly abandoned. Every method the most powerful military in history devised had been defeated. Defeated by peasants with shovels, wooden panels, and pepper. The Americans made a decision that no one would ever forget. If technology cannot solve the problem, you send in a human. You find someone small enough to fit through a 60-centimeter hole. You give them a pistol and a flashlight. You hope they come back out. There was no training manual for what came next, no protocol, no precedent. There was only a hole in the ground and a soldier small enough to enter it. The US Army needed specific men, small, lean, narrow shoulders. The tunnels were only 60 to 80 centimeters wide. A standard soldier in full gear could not fit. They looked for the smallest men in the 25th Infantry Division. They recruited Australians, Puerto Ricans, small-framed Americans. These were men who would usually be considered too small for combat. Down here, Their size was the only qualification that mattered. They called themselves tunnel rats. No officer assigned that name, it just fit. They stripped down before entering the earth. No helmet, no body armor, no rifle. A rifle could not be aimed in a space that narrow. It could not be turned around if something came from behind. They left the modern world above ground. They took a Colt 1911 pistol, one spare magazine, a flashlight, sometimes a knife. That was it. The entire might of the American military was reduced to one handgun and a battery. They developed their own rules. No one above ground knew what they were facing. Rule 1. Move slowly. Every centimetre of floor could be a pressure plate. Every wall could have a wire stretched at throat height in the dark. Rule 2. Use the flashlight as little as possible. Light travels far in a tunnel. If you can see, you can be seen. Learn to move in total darkness. Feel the walls. Hear the breathing that is not your own. Rule 3. If you hear movement ahead, stop. Stay still. Wait. Give your eyes a moment to adjust. Let them find whatever trace of faint light remains. Your ears will tell you the rest. How far away? How many? Which direction? Now, decide. What the tunnel rats discovered inside defied every briefing they had ever received. The Viet Cong had spent 20 years preparing these depths for this exact moment. Usually, the first thing a soldier encountered wasn't an enemy. It was a trap. Punji sticks, sharpened bamboo stakes coated in poison or human waste. They waited in shallow pits under a dusting of dirt. You reach out to crawl. Your palm punches through the surface. The stake goes straight through your hand. The wound is agonizing, but the infection that follows is often a death sentence. Some pits used angled stakes. They slide in easily. They only come out by tearing your flesh to pieces. Others had spikes pointing from both the floor and the ceiling. You crawl into the gap without realizing. Then you try to move. Then there were the animals. The Viet Cong placed bamboo vipers in clay pots sealed with paper. They rigged them to the door frames. You open the door, the pot falls. The paper tears, the snake lands on you in total darkness. Men learn to clear every door from the side, knife extended. Feel for the wires, feel for the pots. Feel for anything that shouldn't be there. Scorpion boxes hung from the ceilings on invisible threads. Walk through the thread and the box dumps its cargo on your head. Some tunnels were filled with fire ants. They are not deadly, but staying quiet is impossible when thousands of ants bite every inch of exposed skin. Beyond the traps, there were the people. Viet Cong soldiers who knew these tunnels better than their own homes. They lived here for years. They moved through the blackness with a speed that seemed impossible. Tunnel rats reported hearing movement ahead. They would stop. They would wait in silence for minutes. Then they would feel the air move. Someone had just passed within arm's reach in the dark, without a sound. Firefights happened at a range of 2 to 3 meters, sometimes less. It was a war of muzzle flashes in a void. The psychological toll was unlike anything else in the Vietnam War. Above ground, soldiers dealt with fear and exhaustion. Below ground, they met something older and more fundamental. The fear of tight spaces. The fear of the dark. The fear of not knowing what sits 6 inches from your nose. Most tunnel rats served multiple tours. Most came back changed in ways they could never explain. Their nightmares weren't about the bullets. They were about the silence and the darkness. They were about the feeling of the walls closing in. They were about the sound of breathing that wasn't theirs. Here is the final score. 9 years, billions of dollars, the most advanced military machine on Earth against peasants with shovels and short-handled hoes. The peasants won. By 1975, when the last American forces left Vietnam, the Cu Chi tunnel system was still operational. It was intact. It functioned exactly as it was designed to work. The B-52 bombers hadn't destroyed it, the gas hadn't cleared it, the water hadn't flooded it, the dogs hadn't found it. Even the tunnel rats hadn't broken it. 250 kilometers of hand-carved soil had done the impossible. It outlasted the full military and technological weight of the United States. The human toll was devastating for everyone involved. Stationed at the Cu Chi base camp, the 25th Infantry Division faced a total nightmare. Their casualty rates were among the highest of any American unit in the conflict. Thousands of soldiers were broken or killed by an invisible ghost. It was a threat that arrived from a direction no one expected. Then, the enemy was gone. They would melt back into the earth before the Americans could even raise their rifles. The Viet Cong paid a heavy price in the dark as well. Tens of thousands died inside the Cu Chi system. Some were buried by bombs that punched through the ceiling. Others were suffocated by gas. Many were hunted down in the black by the tunnel rats. But these tunnels proved something fundamental about war. The United States possessed every advantage. They had the air power, they had the resources, they had the machines. The Viet Cong had dirt and shovels. They were trapped. And when there is nowhere left to run, you go down, you dig, you survive, you wait. The most dangerous weapon on a battlefield isn't a piece of technology. It is the refusal to quit when everything above ground has been stripped away. Those 250 kilometers of tunnels are still there. They survived the pressure of an empire. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe. It helps the channel. Thank you.